Thank you so much. I appreciate everyone coming to listen to the panel today, taking time away from your 2:30 status calls about the call that's supposed to happen right after that. We do appreciate your time being here. So with me, you just saw Reid speaking about Bag Balm. We're going to talk a little more to him. We also have Pyne, an agency veteran, who's started his own shop, Junction 37, a couple of years ago, so he'll also be joining us to talk about this topic. And Vavra, who's the Managing Director of Innovation Services at Isobar. So give these guys a warm welcome, please. So the title of the panel, When AI Meets Your Toothbrush, Innovation or Glitter. So we know digital has really impacted the marketplace, especially for CPGs, in a ton of ways. And we're going to really talk about it from every angle, from the marketing aspect of it, from the product aspect of it, etc. So let's jump right in. I want to start with Chad, actually. I really want to talk to you about how has digital really changed consumers' expectations around CPG brands?
Yeah, so I think Reid nailed it on the head that the consumers are looking for experiences. I think that has been clear for a period of time. And so I do think that having that, having your homepage and not relying on all of the third parties is something that people really, when they're doing the research and they're trying to learn about different things, they really do rely on that. The other thing I think is the authenticity aspect of it. I'm seeing, and so being the innovation services guy, like what does that really mean? I talk a lot about tomorrow. I don't really talk a lot about today with my clients. And I can't tell you, like right now, one of the most popular conversations I have is about blockchain and about the supply chain and the authenticity and the proof of the supply chain, because people really care about what they're buying. They really want to know like what they're getting is the real deal, and they want to know where it came from and what's in it. And one of the things that I would talk about too is that like I'm seeing this come to play in other ways. So I'm looking at the plastic bag bans that are happening and the drinking straw, like grass movement bans that are happening. And I'm realizing that the world is changing as people are starting to kind of really want to affect the experience and the experience of the product that they're buying.
I think if you use the example from Alibaba, their Hema stores, basically every single product that you look at, especially fresh meats, dairy, fish, there's QR codes on there that you will scan, and it'll tell you exactly where that was sourced, that it was caught by Jim the fisherman, the fish's name is Corey, and so I think those are all great examples, as well as customer support too. So we're seeing people obviously coming to us from Twitter, from Facebook, and they want an answer like so fast. So the expectation timeline has decreased dramatically.
Why do you think that is? What do you think has really gotten the consumer to this place where they expect more than just the product being on the shelf, more to quality products? Why do you think they're starting to think deeper about the things they're actually buying and using?
Trust. For me, I think it's trust. Is there's been so much greenwashing out there and brand misidentification that consumers really want to know where their stuff is coming from, and that might not resonate so much with the boomers, but certainly Gen Zs, millennials. We're seeing that, millennials and Gen Zs. We're seeing that more and more. Centennials, excuse me.
Makes sense. Makes perfect sense. So I want to bring you back to the conversation really quickly and just talk about the way you're communicating with the consumer, not just the marketing channels, but all the way through the consumer experience journey. Talk to us about how that's changed with the maturity of digital.
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, I would say we're still in our infancy. We're not even, a digital adolescence. We're more of a digital newborn. But we've been very prescriptive on how we show up on shelf, on how we tell our story across all of our digital platforms. So really, it's just a storytelling that we had some insights that the consumer that we are actually working with is not necessarily 45 to dead. They're actually 15 through dead. That's it.
15 through dead.
15 through dead.
That's a great Nielsen age rank.
It is. So we kind of have catered our story a little bit to appeal to a younger demographic, and it seems to be working. That we're seeing young females, for example, posting about us and talking about us and their beauty tips, and so it's been fun to kind of see that change.
Chris, let's get you into the conversation a little bit here. So we've had, you mentioned a phrase we talked about the other night that I've used a few times, which is digital is where the audience is. We know it's where the consumer is really going, but at the same time, TV tends to be the biggest volume driver. How do you square that conversation when you're talking to your clients, the brands you're working with, to really help them see the value?
Well, I think it really comes down to the fact that we still separate traditional media and digital media, right? There is no separation. There's no need to have separate conversations. There just happens to be people with different skill sets, right? The consumer is where the consumer is. All they've done is proliferated into lots of other different screens, and that's the kind of conversation that we need to have with clients. I find it really interesting because we're lucky enough to work with kind of big CPGs that are looking at DTC and DTC that are looking at big CPG. And you're all looking at each other and going, how can I do what they're doing? The reality is that you are all really smart and can learn from each other. I think when we look at the consumer experiences that we're trying to create, we have to go back to no fear of digital. You're not digital, like junior. You know what you're doing. You're working with a great agency. That's you understand what the consumers want and the consumer experiences want. I think the biggest issue that we have as a whole when we're trying to sell it to our most senior people is legacy, right? Big CPG has big legacy, and it's difficult to sell to the sales team when they can see that TV is driving velocity at shelf every single day in, day out. How then do I layer in other different media channels? How can I prove that? And the reality is you can prove that. The problem is the measurement's not so awesome, right? The measurement that you have out there is great for DTC brands because you've got a closed loop and attribution works and you can see every single step and how things are pushing through the funnel. It's absolutely awesome and great. None of us that are selling in traditional retail stores can actually do that, okay? But yet we're making decisions based upon the fact that Gary Vee's out there telling everybody to put all their money into Facebook because it works, right? What I think is that we have to really start thinking about less about the rhetoric that's happening and more about really focusing on getting real results. The newest thing out there is not necessarily the newest thing. It's about being able to measure stuff, even in the old-fashioned ways, even through market mix models, all of those ways, and iterating as fast as you possibly can. So what I'm trying to get to here is that we are getting caught up in a digital conversation. And yes, we know all those things are going on. But spend some time and work with people who understand how all those things work together and focus on results first. And don't get scared by shiny objects that exist out there that you feel as though you have to follow.
It sounds like you're advocating, Chris, is really back to basics thinking, right, in terms of marketing.
I guess, but most important, it's smart thinking. Focus on results and don't focus on chasing things.
Exactly.
I mean, you don't have to have and work in every single channel. You don't have to test every single channel. There's so many different things that you can do. Get what's working right. Start to prove to your management that it's driving velocity. It's actually driving real sales, and then layer on new and different things. And it doesn't take years and years to do that. Now, you're going to hear from a colleague of mine from Organic Valley, who we work with next, who's going to take you on a 3-year journey that we've taken, going from zero to somewhere really interesting. And it's that, when we say it's back to basics, it's don't ditch everything that's made you really good at what you are, right? Don't chase the digital gold at the end of the rainbow, when some good old-fashioned TV ads can drive a shit ton of volume. Right? So, but think about where your consumer is and how you layer on all of those new things together. That's what I'm trying to advocate.
Makes perfect sense. So as you think about digital present, marketing, digital future, digital present, where you are, and you mentioned, you had the best line of the day, I think, with this conversation about 45 to dead, right? You know that's been growing traditionally. You think about that audience, you think about ways to bring your brand to the digital present and future. What does that mean for you? And are you really focused there, or are you focused on making sure you're just doing the right marketing for your brands overall?
Well, my biggest fear is becoming the Coldwater Creek of skincare brands. I don't know Coldwater Creek, maybe you do. But it's relatively irrelevant brand because their population has aged out. I did not want that to happen. So we do not, our main objective is focus on the core, focus on our core consumer, which is that 45 to 75-year-old female, because you probably all remember your grandmother had a tin of Bad Balm on her countertop maybe. And so that's really our North Star. But we also wanted to start to nurture and develop, just like the tobacco industry does, markets to young kids. We wanted to market to young kids.
Watch yourself.
and make sure that we had that pipeline filled so that by the time they became 20 and 30, they were preaching it to their children as well. So that just shifted us a little bit how we went after that demographic, and it looked like, what was interesting is our heritage video, the one that you saw last, that actually resonated with the younger audience more than some of the newer stuff that we thought. So that was an interesting twist. So we did some test and learning. We went heavy up with the heritage video.
So as you think about that, I mean, you talked about the heritage video, the heritage being what really resonates, the fact that the product's been around forever. Do you think that's an advantage in this digital world? Do you think that the fact that you are already established really helps you, or do you think it's really neither here nor there?
No, I call us the biggest, littlest brand in the world because we have huge awareness, and I think people, what we see on, I remember when I was switching roles and I posted on LinkedIn, who's heard of this, and my LinkedIn feed just blew up. Like, I remember that brand when we went to the beach with my parents and they used that for us, and it just became this nostalgic brand that people maybe had forgotten about or they remember but don't buy it as much, and it was just tap them back on track, and suddenly we're building the cycling bit. So I think, to your point, we have so much upside because we are a nostalgic, true brand that's not trying to come out of thin air and be this, skincare brand, out of thin air.
So does that mean no VR?
Yes, we are going to do some VR with a cow udder that when you put the VR on, you can learn how farmers know.
I can help with that.
Chad, you've been quiet for a minute. Let's bring you back in the conversation a little bit. We talk about all these cool things. AI, VR, chatbots, they're all useful, they're all cool. I'm sure many people in the audience have experimented with them for different campaigns. I know we have on businesses I've worked on. I'm curious, how do you talk to people you're working with about making that decision? Because there's so many things out there, it's changing day after day. How do you decide what to go after and what to say, you know what, let's wait and see, let's maybe hold off on doing that?
Yeah, conversation that I have all the time. And so, probably two different ways that I kind of come at this, and I think that some perspective is maybe the first way, and I'll share a quote. It's my favorite quote in the world. It's from an author named Maria Popova, and she says, "Critical thinking without hope is cynicism, but hope without critical thinking is naivety." And so when I think about those technologies, I can be hopeful for those technologies, and I can think about all the cool things that those technologies might do, but I have to apply a critical lens to it. And so how do I apply that critical lens? And it really comes back to data. And so when I think about the use of data, I'm not really thinking about the KPIs. I'm thinking about data from an experience perspective. And so the way that I structure it is I say data can be descriptive. 500 people did this. Data can be predictive, which is 300 people did that a month ago, 500 people did that last week, the next number you see might be 700 people. It's predictive. And then it can be prescriptive. Well, if 700 people do this, you should probably do this now so you're ready for those 700 people. So I look at the data and I think about a lot of what can we do with this, and then I start to think about the tools. Then I start to think about, knowing that, is VR going to better make that experience better? Is blockchain going to fix that problem? And at the end of the day, they are just tools. They aren't, like you said, they're not magic bullets. They're not shiny, mystical things. I don't know if anyone saw that article maybe 2 weeks ago that was about how people were arguing that AI should have the same rights as your pets. And I was just this is the most laughable thing I've ever seen, because AI is just data and algorithms doing something that's a little bit weird, right? But it's not. It's nothing special. It's nothing we haven't done in the past. We're just doing it in a slightly different way. And so I really have to come back to, like we said, the basics of how do you define and how do you understand an experience and what can you do with that experience, and then start thinking about those tools.
But surely the need, and I agree, but when we think about the time we're having conversations as a group, right, 90% of those conversations are on things that drive less than 1% of our business. Whereas when we come to it and we're thinking about measuring something new, yes, we need to be out there testing and learning pretty quickly. We need to shift that conversation back to, how is this driving sales? How is this driving velocity? How is this driving everything? Everything else is irrelevant, right? Every single media metric that you've looked at, luckily we don't use hover. I don't even know what that really means, but ultimately, You know, if it's driving retail, if it's driving sales, then that's great. If it's changing brand health metrics, that's really good too. I just find it very difficult. And this is a conversation to reconcile going to a client who are 2,000 Amish farmers, or going to Hello Products, who I'm trying to teach digital to Amish farmers, it's very difficult. But then also, you know, speaking to Hello Products, who are new up and coming D2C brands, right? But having the conversation with them about, and they want to know, what is the thing I need to focus on? What is the most important thing that's going to be for my business? Is it Amazon first? Ultimately, it's simple. It's how they know us, what our mission is, where they need to buy and how they need to buy. It's that simple. And if we can put those metrics behind, or at least those steps behind our innovation, and prove that around actual retail sales, then we'll be so much more successful than we'll be.
And I don't disagree with that, but I will give the example of a client that I'm working with a lot. They are very big. They are they're the Air Force, all right? 770,000 airmen.
We've heard of them.
Yeah, you've heard of the Air Force, right? There's 770,000 customers, employees, whatever you want to call them. One of the things that we're dealing with today is the cloud. So they come to me all the time and they say, if I knew how important the cloud would have been to my business 5 years ago, I would have made a lot of different decisions. Like, I wouldn't have done all these things. And so, while I completely agree, I also will say that 5 years from now, you don't want to be you don't want to be playing catch up.
How much of the conversation that you're having, either yourselves or with your brand partners, do you think comes back to that period where people miss the internet? And there's just that fear of having that happen again. Do you think that really plays into just that, ooh, we messed up that time and now we really got to make sure we're on top of everything going forward? Or do you not feel that way?
Miss the internet is probably too broad, right? like I mean, I think at this point I think that that's probably too broad. I think that I think Google Cardboard is a good example, right? There were a lot of people that sort of said, let's go do something on Google Cardboard to kind of like showcase our brand, because it was, they didn't want to miss out on VR. And so obviously, like, you know, if you look at the Gartner hype cycle, you know, the VR has kind of started to kind of hit that trough of disillusionment, and it's maybe kind of coming out of it now. So I guess what I would say is that no, it's not an I missed it, it's more a when should I get into it? It's more an understanding of like when's it appropriate, and what I would say, and what Gartner will tell you, the appropriate time is when it's coming out of the trough of disillusionment. You know, it's the blockchain's a really good example because it's coming out of that trough right now, and cryptocurrency is like not what you should care about. Like, that is not the important part of blockchain. The other parts of blockchain that allow you to have this immutable record that no one can change and nobody can lie about. That's the important part of it, and that's what the world is finding now, and that's where I think people are going to look back and go, I should have gotten into that sooner if they don't do it now.
Totally fair. I want to shift gears slightly, and Chris, let me ask you. There's been, over the last couple of months, years, a comeback, if you will, around privacy. And a lot of times we talk about digital marketing, we talk about data in a heavy fashion. As you think about privacy, how do you think that the change in attitude toward privacy is going to really affect everyone in the room as digital marketers?
Well, I think it already has. It's definitely happened overseas, as we know. We've talked that to death. We've got to embrace it, the reality is. We're becoming paralyzed with all the data that we're collecting and how personal that is, you know. And there was a great thing, did anyone go to the upfronts yesterday? Like the new Disney upfront, this mega conglomerate. Kimmel basically says that people are using data to ask people who've just bought a pair of shoes to buy a pair of shoes, right? And we're collecting all of this data, whether it's private or not. I think, you know, ultimately it puts the onus on us. I mean, blockchain is going to be great for collecting data and using that in the future. It's going to democratize it. It's going to make it much more safe for consumers. Consumers are looking at opting in, right? If you give them great consumer experiences, which takes us back to the whole idea of if we become less worried about personalized data and much more focused on creating great brand experiences, using deterministic, probabilistic metadata, all of those things that are available, the more succeed. So try and embrace it. Don't be scared about it.
I found it interesting that San Francisco just outlawed facial recognition technology. You hear that? Yesterday, I think. Crazy. But I mean, yeah.
Let me ask you, Reid, let me ask you. So there's been a structural shift in sort of the retail space, if you will, with e-com, subscribe and save, rise of the private label going back, position zero in e-commerce. As you think about what happened with Kraft Heinz and that massive breakdown, do you feel like all these things are a harbinger of, difficulty for some of these massive brands that we've all grown up with, or do you look at it differently?
So yes, I feel that it's dangerous waters a bit. I mean, what happened with Kraft Heinz and 3G was, number one, zero-based budgeting. Let's cut everything out. Number two is let's not spend anything on marketing, so we're going to fire a bunch of marketers, not market. Number three is we're going to not even market to our consumers with the historic brands that really are bread and butter. Oscar Mayer, I mean, these were the brands that really brought them to where they are, and suddenly they're losing vast market share. And I think the fourth piece behind that too is consumer demand has changed. So that's why you see General Mills buying Annie's to appeal to the millennial mom, the green-leaning mom. You see, even Hershey's buying Skinny Pop to go after a different audience segmentation. So I think they lost sight of that. So I think in order for incumbent brands to stay relevant, they have really bobbed their way to these young upstart brands. So, and if you think about growth across CPG across the world for really the past 5 years, it's been anywhere from 2% to 3%, back down to 2%. Meanwhile, these younger upstart brands are growing at 60, 30, 50% year over year. So that's where they're getting their growth from.
So, Chad, let me ask you, do you think it's all about the features, what's different about a product coming in the marketplace, or what else is really driving the conversation as you see it right now? Is ethics a part of what makes consumers buy? Is the supply chain part of what makes consumers buy? What is it really now?
Yeah, at the CPG level, I don't think it's features. I really don't. I think ethics are going to play, like I said earlier, I think ethics are going to play a much stronger role in a lot of the conversations and a lot of the drivers, especially when I think about the moments in a experience, the moments in a human journey when you can change a person's mind. And obviously those are things like getting married, having kids, et cetera, and so forth, right? So if you can really attach to those moments in an ethical way, I think that's going to be a big part of where we go. I know we talked about, and this isn't necessarily CPG, right? But we talked a little bit about Apple's AirPods. Who has AirPods? Who loves their AirPods? Okay, sorry. AirPods are one of the worst things that has ever been released to the world. And here's why. They are a sealed piece of plastic that has a lithium-ion battery in it that can never be thrown away, that can never be recycled. They're $159. They're a luxury product for a luxury person. And after 18 months, the battery is predicted to only last 40 minutes. The only ethical thing you can do with that product is put it in your drawer and forget about it. If you put it in a crusher, the battery will blow up and hurt somebody. If a person tries to recycle it, the battery will blow up and hurt somebody. If it ends up in a landfill, it will be there for 15,000 years. That is going to come back to haunt Apple. I think Apple's packaging and the paper they use will probably come back to haunt them first. But I think, yes, ethics are going to be a big, big part of that.
So no one's going to the Apple store after this, because it's basically right across the street. Anyway.
By the way, how terrible.
So that's where you draw.
Don't throw them away.
Huh?
Do not throw them away.
In the drawer, I need to. All right, so let me ask you, Chris. There's been a ton of cross-pollination between CPGs, DTC brands. Really, it seems like both spaces are trying to come into each other's worlds. And I really want to ask you, what do you think each side can really learn from each other?
Listen, DTC people are awesome, right? And it's really easy to look at them because we generally look at them as smaller companies, right? And it's so easy with smaller companies because they have no middle management and yada, yada, yada. They've just discovered a way in which they can make information and decisions work really, really, really fast. You can do that. There are companies out there that allow that to happen. And a lot of that is looking internally at the skill set, right? That's really important to learn from DTCs, because they're just smart people who generally learn everything in the whole scheme because they haven't had to rely on silos in other areas, right? They can learn a lot from the more traditional, in terms of the fact that, you know, we work with a couple of DTC brands. One of them is Kensington's, which is was DTC, but now it's sold. It was bought by Unilever, and now it's distributed in thousands and thousands of stores. Second is Hello Products, which is a toothpaste, which used to be DTC, now is in 40,000 stores. They need to learn from you about how to sell this thing to retailers, about when it comes down to range reviews and it comes down to resets, what they need to do. And they also need to learn from you guys about how traditional media can also drive product, etc.
Absolutely, thank you. I want to really quickly, thank everyone up here for their time today. I want to thank all of you for your attention. And now I'm going to turn it back over to our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you. Great job, guys.